bread, rice, potatoes. If you have diabetes, your doctor probably told you to skip them. But these are everyday foods for most people. Telling you to stop eating them forever? That's not realistic. The truth is, you can eat them safely. You just need the right tricks. I'm Dr. Carlos Mendoza, board-certified physician. And here's what the $8 billion blood sugar supplement industry doesn't want you to know. Simple food preparation tricks work better than their expensive pills. The supplement industry doesn't want you to see this video, but since you're watching right now, you're already ahead. Drop a comment saying, "I deserve the truth," if you believe healthcare information should be free and accessible to everyone. Only the supplement executives and people who profit from your confusion won't comment. In this video, I'll uncover 6 science-backed strategies that let you eat bread, rice, and potatoes without spiking your blood sugar. And stick around, because strategy number 1 is the most powerful of them all. A simple trick that reduces glucose spikes by 35% using the exact same meal you're already eating. If you have family members avoiding their favorite foods because they're terrified of blood sugar spikes, share this video with them. Too many people are unnecessarily restricting their diets, missing out on foods they love without knowing there are simple solutions. A quick note, even though I'm a physician, I'm not your physician. Please talk to your doctor before making any changes to your diet or medical regimen. All scientific references and peer-reviewed studies are listed in the description below. Strategy 6. The resistant starch method. Let's start with one of the most powerful but least known tools for blood sugar control: resistant starch transformation. Most starches, bread, pasta, rice, anything made from flour, break down into glucose quickly. That raises your blood sugar fast, and repeated blood sugar spikes are what drive worsening insulin resistance and pancreas dysfunction. Over time, that's what makes diabetes worse, but resistant starch behaves very differently. Your digestive enzymes aren't good at breaking it down. Instead of spiking your blood glucose within 30 minutes, resistant starch travels all the way to your large intestine, where your gut bacteria ferment it. That fermentation produces short-chain fatty acids like butyrate, which actually improve insulin sensitivity, reduce chronic inflammation, and even feed the cells lining your colon. So how do you get resistant starch? Here's the trick. Take your typical starchy foods, the ones that normally raise your blood sugar, cool them in the refrigerator for at least 12 hours, then reheat them before eating. Doing this increases the food's resistant starch content by 2 to 3 times. That's a 150% to 200% increase. Take bread, pasta, rice, or potatoes. When you cool them overnight, part of the starch crystallizes into this resistant form. It's a process called starch retrogradation. The gelatinized starch molecules realign and form tightly packed crystalline structures that resist digestion in your small intestine. You can still eat your favorite foods. Just cool them in the fridge overnight, reheat them later, and enjoy the massive metabolic benefits. Multiple studies confirm this. Cooling cooked rice or potatoes to 39 degrees Fahrenheit for 24 hours significantly increases resistant starch content by 2 to 3 times compared to freshly cooked starches. A study published in Nature found that cooling rice at 4°C for 24 hours, then reheating it, increased resistant starch from 0.64 grams per 100 grams to 1.65 grams per 100 grams, a 2.6 times increase. Clinically, eating cooled and then reheated rice or potatoes reduces postprandial glucose, that's the medical term for after-meal blood sugar, and reduces insulin spikes by 40% to 50% in people with type 2 diabetes. Research published in the journal Nutrients showed that chilled potatoes reduced glucose spikes and insulin levels by over 20% compared to freshly cooked potatoes. So, if you're eating at home, you don't have to give up bread, rice or potatoes. Just cook them the night before, cool or freeze them, then reheat when you're ready to eat. The taste may be slightly different, but it's close enough and the blood sugar benefits are hard to ignore. Plus, there are many foods naturally high in resistant starch that you can add to your regimen without any preparation. Beans, lentils, chickpeas, green peas, steel-cut oats, and pearl barley. But resistant starch is just the beginning. The next strategy works even when you're eating out at restaurants where you can't control the preparation. Strategy 5. The food pairing principle. The next principle is strategic food pairing. We rarely eat carbs in isolation in real life, and what you eat alongside your carbs can dramatically change your glucose response. Comprehensive meta-analyses of over 150 clinical trials show that adding just 25 to 30 grams of protein to a carbohydrate meal can reduce the glucose area under the curve by up to 50% in healthy adults. In people with type 2 diabetes, that reduction is even more pronounced, up to 60%. Dietary fat also helps. Fat delays gastric emptying, meaning food stays in your stomach longer. That improves insulin clearance and eventually improves your beta cell function, the part of your pancreas that makes insulin. That's why we don't want to eat starchy or processed carbohydrates in isolation. Some diabetes educators call this avoiding naked carbs. That's why rice and beans is usually better than rice alone. Potatoes with butter or potatoes with olive oil and grilled chicken produce a gentler glucose spike than eating potatoes by themselves. Another powerful addition: acid, vinegar, lemon juice, lime juice, fermented foods like sauerkraut or kimchi. These lower the rate at which starch is broken down by inhibiting the enzyme alpha amylase. Vinegar, specifically acetic acid, also improves insulin sensitivity in muscle cells and can blunt glucose spikes by working on liver gluconeogenesis, the process where your liver makes new glucose. Now here's where it gets even better. You can supercharge food pairing by eating your carbohydrates last. Food order matters. If you start your meal with bread, juice or rice, you get a sharp glucose peak within 30 to 45 minutes. But if you eat your protein and vegetables first, wait about 10 minutes, and then finish with carbs, your stomach releases a much slower mix of glucose into the intestines. You absorb that glucose much slower and steadier. It's the exact same food, the exact same calories. But eating it in a different order gives you a completely different glucose curve, up to 73% lower peak glucose. This is especially important in restaurants where they bring bread or chips and salsa before your salad or main entree. Eat your salad and protein first, then go for the bread or chips. Small behavioral change, huge metabolic dividends. Multiple clinical studies confirm this. A randomized controlled crossover trial led by Dr. Louis Aron at Weill Cornell Medical College, published in Diabetes Care, showed that people with type 2 diabetes who ate protein and vegetables before carbohydrates had a 73% lower glucose area under the curve. The study also found a 40% reduction in glucose peaks at 30 minutes and 31% lower insulin levels compared to eating carbs first. A recent study in Japan using continuous glucose monitors in healthy adults showed that eating rice last significantly reduced postprandial glycemic excursions, those dangerous blood sugar spikes, by up to 50%. But food pairing is just half the equation. The next strategy takes advantage of your body's natural glucose disposal system, something Big Pharma hopes you never learn about. Strategy 4. The movement protocol. Another thing that makes a massive difference: walking or moving right after a meal. A randomized controlled trial from the University of Otago, published in the journal Diabetologia, showed that just a 10-minute walk immediately after a meal can lower postprandial glucose by 12% to 22% compared to sitting. It doesn't have to be walking. Any light activity, cleaning the kitchen, doing dishes, climbing stairs, even standing and doing light housework, makes a measurable difference. But walking is the most studied and probably the easiest for most people to do consistently. The best time to walk or exercise is as soon as possible after a meal, ideally within 15 to 30 minutes of finishing. That's when your blood sugar starts to rise, and that's the window where movement is most effective. Why is walking after eating so powerful? Because it activates your soleus muscle, the muscle in your calf that runs just below the knee down to the heel. The soleus is a metabolic powerhouse. It can soak up glucose from your bloodstream very quickly without even needing insulin. It uses a different mechanism called non-insulin-mediated glucose uptake. The soleus is made of slow-twitch muscle fibers, which allow it to sustain contractions for long periods without fatiguing. So you're burning lots of glucose for a sustained period, 20, 30, 40 minutes, before your muscle gets tired. Recent research from the University of Houston found that engaging the soleus muscle through simple seated movements, they called it soleus push-ups, can improve blood sugar control for hours, even while sitting. But traditional walking remains the gold standard because it engages multiple muscle groups and has additional cardiovascular benefits. Now here's where it gets interesting. The timing of when you eat your biggest carb meal also matters tremendously. Strategy 3. The circadian timing strategy. Here's something most people don't know. Do not eat your largest carbohydrate meals late at night. The later you eat carbs, the worse your glucose response becomes, even if you're eating the exact same food. Research shows the same meal eaten in the evening will produce a 15% to 20% higher glucose spike than if you ate it at midday. That's because physiologically our insulin sensitivity and our pancreas's ability to secrete insulin follow a circadian rhythm. We simply can't process glucose as well in the evening as we do earlier in the day. Your body is literally designed to handle carbohydrates better in the morning and early afternoon. By evening, your pancreatic beta cells are less responsive, your muscle cells are less sensitive to insulin, and your liver is more likely to convert excess glucose into fat. What makes it worse, late night, is when we have elevated levels of endogenous melatonin, the hormone that makes you sleepy. Melatonin actually reduces insulin secretion by 40% to 50%. Less insulin means more glucose stays in your bloodstream longer. Research on circadian glucose metabolism has found that people who ate the same carbohydrate meal at different times of day had dramatically different glucose responses, with evening meals producing significantly higher blood sugar spikes. So the earlier you eat your carbohydrate-rich meals, the better. I recommend eating your last meal of the day, especially if it contains significant carbohydrates, at least 3 hours before bedtime. This is why intermittent fasting and time-restricted eating work so well for blood sugar control. It's not just about what you eat, it's about when your body's metabolic machinery is optimized to handle it. But even with perfect timing, the quality of your carbohydrates makes an enormous difference. Strategy 2, the carb quality matrix. A lot of people will tell you to just cut out all carbs. But it's not really the carbs per se, it's the type and processing level of carbs that cause issues with insulin resistance and diabetes. Not all carbs are created equal. The way carbs are processed determines how fast they're absorbed and how fast they spike your glucose. Flour milled into a fine powder, like white bread, instant oatmeal, or cream of wheat, digests extremely quickly. Within 15 to 20 minutes, it's flooding your bloodstream with glucose. But whole grains, coarser grains, or intact kernels digest much slower, over 2 to 3 hours, and don't cause the same dramatic spikes. Think of it like kindling versus logs in a fire. Fine flour, white bread, cereal, pastries, chips, crackers is like throwing sawdust into the fire. It burns fast and hot, creating an intense spike. You get a massive glucose surge, followed by a massive insulin surge, followed by a crash. On the flip side, steel-cut oats, intact grain berries, or high-fiber carbohydrates like quinoa or bulgur wheat burn more like logs. They burn slower and more evenly over time. For your body, that means smaller, steadier glucose curves instead of sharp spikes and crashes that damage your blood vessels and exhaust your pancreas. Choose carbohydrates made from whole foods, minimally processed and high in fiber. Fiber is probably the most important component of carbohydrates. It slows digestion, feeds healthy gut bacteria, improves insulin sensitivity, and helps with weight management. Here's a practical example. White rice, glycemic index around 73, almost no fiber. Brown rice, glycemic index 68, with 3.5 grams of fiber per cup. Black rice or wild rice, glycemic index 42 to 45, with 5 to 6 grams of fiber per cup. Same basic food, rice, completely different metabolic response. Same principle applies to bread. White bread, glycemic index 75, 0 fiber, spikes blood sugar in minutes. Sprouted grain bread, like Ezekiel, glycemic index 36, 4 to 5 grams of fiber per slice, plus resistant starch naturally. Sourdough bread, glycemic index 48 to 54 because fermentation partially breaks down starches and produces organic acids that slow glucose absorption. For potatoes, russet potatoes, glycemic index 85 to 90, one of the highest of any food. Sweet potatoes, glycemic index 44 to 61, depending on preparation, plus fiber and nutrients that improve insulin sensitivity. And here's the key, you can lower the glycemic index of any potato by up to 40% just by cooking it, cooling it overnight, which creates resistant starch, and reheating it before eating. Combine that with eating it alongside protein and vegetables, and you've transformed a blood sugar bomb into a reasonable food choice. Before we get to the final strategy, the one that combines everything and that pharmaceutical companies absolutely hate, show your support by liking this video and subscribing. If you believe health information should be free and not controlled by corporations profiting from your confusion and fear, hit that subscribe button. If you're tired of being told you can never eat normal food again, if you're sick of expensive supplements being pushed as the only solution, subscribe to this channel. Only the supplement company executives and pharmaceutical reps who profit from keeping you dependent on expensive products won't subscribe. Strategy 1. The Vinegar Amplifier. Now for the final strategy, the one that actually amplifies all the others we've covered. Strategic vinegar consumption. Most people think of vinegar as nothing more than a salad dressing ingredient. But research from Arizona State University and institutions around the world has revealed that vinegar, specifically the acetic acid it contains, is one of the most powerful natural blood sugar regulators available. What makes vinegar particularly special is its ability to inhibit the enzyme alpha-glucosidase, the same mechanism that the diabetes drug Carbs uses. With just 1 to 2 tablespoons of vinegar consumed before or during a carbohydrate meal, you can reduce the glucose spike by 20% to 35%. Vinegar directly slows down the rate at which your stomach empties into your small intestine, giving your body more time to process glucose gradually instead of all at once. The acetic acid in vinegar also improves insulin sensitivity in skeletal muscle, by up to 34%, meaning your muscles become better at pulling glucose out of your bloodstream without needing as much insulin. This is huge for people with insulin resistance or type 2 diabetes. But what really sets vinegar apart is its effect on hepatic glucose production. Your liver constantly produces small amounts of glucose through gluconeogenesis. In people with diabetes or insulin resistance, the liver often produces too much glucose, especially overnight and between meals. Studies have found that consuming 2 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar before bed can reduce fasting blood glucose the next morning by 4% to 6%. That's the equivalent of what some diabetes medications achieve, but through a completely natural mechanism. A study published in Frontiers in Clinical Diabetes and Healthcare followed people with type 2 diabetes who consumed 30 milliliters, about 2 tablespoons, of apple cider vinegar daily for 8 weeks, and found significant reductions in both fasting blood glucose and hemoglobin A1C, the 3-month average blood sugar marker. A comprehensive meta-analysis published in Frontiers in Nutrition in 2025 confirmed that vinegar consumption significantly improves glycemic control in people with type 2 diabetes. The best way to maximize the blood sugar benefits of vinegar: dilute 1 to 2 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar or red wine vinegar in a large glass of water and drink it 10 to 15 minutes before your carbohydrate-containing meal. This gives the acetic acid time to start working on your digestive enzymes before the food arrives. You can also incorporate vinegar directly into your meals, as a salad dressing, in marinades in cooking, or even just splashed over vegetables. Many people don't realize that combining vinegar with the food sequencing strategy creates a synergistic effect. Start your meal with a salad dressed with vinegar, then eat your protein, then finish with carbs. You're stacking multiple glucose-lowering mechanisms simultaneously. The research on vinegar timing suggests that consistency matters more than the exact amount. People who used vinegar daily with at least one meal saw better results than those who used larger amounts occasionally. And here's an unexpected benefit. Vinegar has been shown in multiple studies to increase satiety, the feeling of fullness, by up to 55%, which means you naturally eat less and feel satisfied with smaller portions, particularly of carbohydrates. One important note: always dilute vinegar. Never drink it straight. The acidity can damage tooth enamel and irritate your esophagus. If you have gastroparesis, delayed stomach emptying, which some people with diabetes develop, talk to your doctor before using vinegar regularly, as it may worsen that condition. Your complete action plan. Let's bring this all together into a complete protocol you can start using today. Before your meal, drink 1 to 2 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar, diluted in water, 10 to 15 minutes before eating. This primes your digestive system and improves insulin sensitivity. Meal preparation. Whenever possible, cook your rice, potatoes, or pasta the night before. Refrigerate overnight, then reheat before eating. This creates resistant starch that reduces glucose impact by 40% to 50%. Meal composition. Never eat carbs alone. Always pair them with protein, healthy fats, and non-starchy vegetables. This slows digestion and reduces glucose spikes by up to 50%. Eating sequence. Start with vegetables and protein. Wait 10 minutes. Then eat your carbohydrates last. This reduces peak glucose by up to 73%. After eating, walk for at least 10 minutes, within 15 to 30 minutes of finishing your meal. This activates your muscles to absorb glucose and can lower post-meal blood sugar by 12% to 22%. Meal timing. Eat your carbohydrate-rich meals earlier in the day, ideally at breakfast and lunch. Keep dinner lower in carbs and finish eating at least 3 hours before bed. Carb quality. Choose whole, minimally processed carbohydrates. Steel-cut oats instead of instant. Sourdough or sprouted grain bread instead of white bread. Brown, black, or wild rice instead of white rice. Sweet potatoes instead of russet. Potatoes. Now, I know what you're thinking. That sounds like a lot to remember. But here's the beautiful thing, you don't have to implement everything at once. Start with just one or two of these strategies and gradually incorporate more as they become habit. Consistency matters more than perfection when it comes to transforming your blood sugar control. Maybe you start with just the food sequencing strategy, eating your carbs last. That alone can produce dramatic results. Then add the 10-minute post-meal walk. Then start experimenting with resistant starch by cooling and reheating your rice and potatoes. Layer in the vinegar before meals. Focus on choosing higher quality, less processed carbohydrates. Finally, shift your eating window to front-load carbs earlier in the day. Each strategy builds on the others, creating a synergistic effect that can transform your relationship with food and your blood sugar control. Your blood sugar doesn't have to spike dangerously every time you eat bread, rice, or potatoes when you're armed with these science-based strategies that work with your body's natural metabolic processes instead of against them. And here's what's really exciting. These aren't just strategies for people with diabetes. Anyone who wants stable energy, better mental clarity, reduced cravings, easier weight management, and long-term metabolic health can benefit from controlling their glucose responses. Because those blood sugar spikes and crashes aren't just a diabetes problem. They're an everyone problem. They cause inflammation, accelerate aging, damage blood vessels, increase cancer risk, and contribute to nearly every chronic disease we face. By implementing these strategies, you're not just managing diabetes, you're optimizing your entire metabolic health for longevity and vitality. If you believe everyone deserves access to real health information, not just fear-mongering from supplement companies, subscribe to this channel. If you're tired of being manipulated by an industry that profits when you're sick and scared, hit that subscribe button now. Only those who profit from your confusion won't subscribe. Thanks for watching, and remember, you can eat bread, rice, and potatoes again. I'll see you in the next video where we'll dive deep into cheap foods you can eat to build muscle and fight sarcopenia, and how to use them strategically throughout your day. Stay healthy, keep your blood sugar stable, and I'll see you soon.